Hi, it's Dr. Colson. This is the week 2 video just to kind of get you up to speed on what happened last week and looking forward to what's coming for this week. The first thing I want to mention is everybody did a great job. A few of you didn't quite get your stuff turned in. I don't know if you didn't get it submitted. Like I said, I've sent those a reminder through VoiceThread, so make sure you're always checking your email. I will usually, if you've submitted it before Sunday, I try to let you know. But one of the things I did want to talk to you about today was our first discussion question. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so the first question, this chapter 4 had to do with IDA, which is Individuals with Disability Education Act. As you read through, it's been through several different iterations. We are currently in IDEA 2004, or you may have heard IDEIA, Individuals Education with Disabilities Improvement Act. But one of the things I want to discuss is how does a student become eligible to receive special education and related services under IDEA? Really, it's a two-pronged test for students to receive services under IDEA. First, they have to have one of those 13 disability categories. If they do not have one of those disability categories, they automatically will not qualify for IDEA. Now, generally, most of the time, conditions can fall under one of those categories. The second prong is that it has to adversely affect their educational performance. Now, adversely affect means it is very significant, it is beyond the norm, it is just beyond a student making C's or D's or even some F's. You know, if you find out that a student hasn't been turning in their homework and it's all else, well, maybe that's not adversely affecting their educational performance. Maybe if they didn't do their assignments, or they had excessive absences. It really isn't the disability. It may be one of those other things. So that's really it. I saw a lot of you talk about RTI. Now, RTI is kind of our pathway to ensure that when we're looking at a student who may have a learning disability, now hence a specific learning disability, which is only one of those 13 categories. Generally speaking, we want to make sure that it's not a lack of instruction, that there's actually a disconnect in the brain and not a lack of instruction. So we recommend that they go through MTSS or RTI, some sort of intense intervention to make sure that that's not what's causing the discrepancy in their schoolwork or whatever those bases may be. But just to qualify under IDEA, nowhere in the law does a student have to go through RTI. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. I suspect that a student has a physical disability. They do not have to go through RTI before they can receive special education services. So generally speaking, that RTI comes into place. We're looking at a disability. I've been through all 3 tiers, and now I may say, okay, I recommend, or I'm recommend there's an evaluation done for this child for special ed. Then we can look at all their RTI scores and say, okay, yes, they really do have a disability and it is adversely affecting their educational performance. So like I said, I just wanted to go over that, make sure we were clear that the law does not state you have to have RTI before you can be eligible to receive services. You have to have one of those disability categories, and you have to be, it has to adversely affect your educational performance. Now, if we look at the next question, most everybody did well on this. This is kind of the same thing. If a student has one of those disabling conditions listed, so if I have one of those 13 categories, does that mean that I'm always eligible for special ed. And no, just because you have the disability doesn't mean you're always eligible. That is really when that it has to adversely affect the educational performance. That's where that comes in for that one. Okay, well, that kind of gets through our discussion questions. I graded your case studies. Everything looks pretty good on those. And then this next week, we are covering 3 chapters. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. I've already started looking at those discussion, and you're really doing a great job in talking about the difference between IDA and 504. 504 really is a broader category or provides broader services, whereas IDA is very restrictive in who it serves, and also it is specially designed instruction where 504 may not be. It's more of an accommodation. Chapter 6 really talks about the Americans with Disability Act. You'll see a couple of case studies about that, of where that's come into play. And you'll see as you read through this, you'll start to notice more things when you're out in public due to this law. And then Chapter 7 is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which we now know as ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. The textbook has not been updated to reflect the new change in the law, but there's information within that chapter for you. And so just make sure that you know that NCLB, No Child Left Behind, is no longer in effect. It has been reauthorized. One of the main things that NCLB got rid of, that ESSA got rid of, that NCLB had, was highly qualified teachers. That's no longer in the law, and they've removed that with IDEA. Something else that it really has to do with the assessment and really giving it back to the states and those really high stakes tests. You had to meet AYP, adequate yearly progress, with No Child Left Behind, and that's not the case anymore with ESSA. So there's quite a few staggering differences between the two laws. I think ESSA is a little more friendlier for students with disabilities, I guess is to say, because it really puts the control back into the state and the local school districts instead of the federal government mandating those things. So make sure you look at those things. Also, another thing, go ahead and skip to week 4 and really start looking at that state law presentation that you have to do in that bullying paper. I don't want you to get caught off guard and have to do both of those last week. So look forward to that. My graduate students, you also have to do a paper, so make sure you look at that. Y'all have a great week, and I will see you next week. Bye.